Hello Stampers, this is Yana Smakula for My Favorite Things. Welcome back for another video tutorial. In this video, I have a clean and simple Christmas card featuring the My Favorite Things Jolly Molly stamp set. I just love the joyful Dachshunds in this stamp set. And by the way, the word Dachshunds is kind of new to me, so excuse me if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. I actually have two card ideas. They're very similar in design or very similar in concept. One simply requires a little bit more work as it uses more images. I started making my cards by doing the usual. I stamped the images in Copic marker friendly ink using my Mini Misty stamping tool onto Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock. Now I did stamp several panels as I knew I would need quite a few images for my cards, and also because these puppies are just the cutest. Now, I didn't worry about making the most perfect impression here as I planned to re-stamp the image outlines with VersaFine Onyx Black ink once my coloring was done. And that's the reason I used the Misty stamping tool and the reason I kept the images on the lid of my Misty after my initial stamping was done. Now, as for the coloring, I used my go-to Copic marker colors in go-to Copic marker color combinations, and I did very simple coloring here. I wanted to color quite a lot of images, so I did not want to complicate things and make it unnecessarily difficult to copy. Now, there are some great examples on the My Favorite Things website if you need more inspiration and more ideas, and I encourage you to check them out. There are some super cute examples with texture and pattern added to the sweaters that the pups are wearing. Now, I didn't do anything like that. Like I said, I kept my coloring simple and basic. I feel like these images are quite adorable as is, so I didn't do any texture on the sweaters. If you want to be really fancy, you know what you guys could do? You could even stamp the images onto pattern paper, cut out just the sweater portions, and paper piece these in place to add some really fancy texture and pattern to these images. How about that? Now, I used R27, R24, R22, and also I'm not showing that here, but I used R20 markers to color the Santa's hats, some of the sweaters, the birds, and then the gifts red. The C1 marker was used to add a little bit of shading to any of the white areas like the fur on the Santa's hat. Next, the pups were colored light and dark brown using the same marker combination. For the dark brown pups, I started with E79, next used E37 and added E33 and E31 as the lightest colors. For the light brown pups, I skipped using the E79 and just started with a lighter E37 color, which was the darkest for that particular case. Now, you could also make your pups a little bit darker by adding some gray marker to the mix, but I was pretty happy with the light brown and the dark brown pup options. Now, the noses were colored using C5 and then C7 for the shading, and in some cases, I also used the C9 marker to darken them a little bit. You can see I did color over the Christmas lights on this particular puppy. I figured I would simply use a white gel pen, and I also have a red opaque pen in my stash, and I would color the lights in versus trying to preserve those areas when coloring the puppy, and that worked quite well for me. Next, I used some dark greens to color the sweater, G99, G94, and G21. Now, these are more darker, muted greens, the kind of green that I prefer to use for winter greenery or for winter cards, but I also used a lot of YG01, YG03, and YG17 to color the gifts, and then the rest of the sweaters more cheery green. Once my coloring was done, I re-stamped the outlines using the Misty tool and the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I love this trick and I use it all the time. Now, you could also stamp the images in VersaFine ink right away, heat emboss them in clear embossing powder, or simply heat set the VersaFine if you wanted. Now, the way I do my stamping works for me, but there are many different ways to go about it. So I encourage you to use what you are most comfortable with. Here I used that red opaque pen that I mentioned to color the lights red, and I also used a white gel pen, that's a Sakura number 10 pen, to add white lights. Now there are coordinating dies available, and I used mine to cut these adorable images out. I also added highlights to each image using that same Sakura white Jelly Roll pen, and that added another level of cuteness to these images. Next, to make the cards, I stamped the sentiments at the bottom of my panels, and I just added the puppies on top. The difference between the two cards is in how I added the puppies. For this panel, I plan to have 3 Dachshunds placed vertically on the card as if they're walking in snow. To create that look of snow, I used a white pen. Now, this is a pretty wide white marker or pen that I have in my stash, and I simply drew a pile of snow on the paper, similar to how you would draw a shadow under something. But instead of using a gray marker for the shadow, I used a white one to create a snow. The trick here is to use colored cardstock, but not something too pale. Otherwise, the snow won't be visible on the card. My second card uses a much lighter cardstock panel, like a very pale blue, for the background, and the snow isn't quite as noticeable on that card. Now, with the snow added, I foam mounted the puppies. I added the gifts and the birds to fill in the scene. I even have one of the Dachshunds holding a gift in his mouth. That's totally adorable. I also wanted to add some falling snow to this card just to fill the background in, so I added lots of white dots onto the background using my white Jelly Roll pen, again in size 10, and I tried to make some of the dots a little bit larger. I did keep the dots about a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the card, so the finished card, looks as if there is some sort of border around it. Now, if you didn't want to use a white Jelly Roll pen, you could also use Nuvo drops in white to create the snow. Here's the other card I made using this stamp set. Here, I filled the background entirely with the Dachshunds and have some going off the edge of the card to create the look of a continuous pattern. I had a blast making these cards and coloring the images from this set. Now, here's another video I did last year with an interactive element added to it. Do check it out. Thanks for watching. Love you guys. I'll see you next time.